Late last week, we got news that Scott Derrickson, who directed Doctor Strange 1 and was going to direct Doctor Strange 2 too, had dropped out over creative differences. What we've seen online is that it was mutual between him and Marvel. But a lot of us are thinking that behind the scenes, what really happened, we don't know what happened, they haven't said, and they'll probably never say publicly, is that he wanted to do Doctor Strange more like a traditional horror movie or go darker with it, which is true to his roots as a horror director. Like Scott Derrickson did that before he jumped to Marvel. I think he did Sinister, right? And I like Sinister. But Marvel and Kevin Feige wanted to make it, lighter and more safe, more PG-13 family friendly, because that fits the Marvel brand and is a big reason why Marvel is so successful. And thus, that friction is why they parted ways. Unconfirmed, this is just us speculating. But if Scott Derrickson would like to, be able to do some superhero comic book movies that would allow him to flex his horror muscles more, maybe he could come to DC. Do some Warner Brothers stuff. Now, he's still an executive producer in Doctor Strange 2, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, so he still has that relationship with Marvel. So I don't know if he would be allowed to direct a DC movie while executive producing a Marvel one. But this could be the beginning of the end of his relationship with Marvel. After the falling out with Doctor Strange, I don't know if he would direct another Marvel movie. So if he leaves Marvel completely in the near future, maybe he could come on over to Warner Brothers. And here are 6 DC movies that I think might fit someone with Scott Derrickson's background and experience. So let's do it. Number 1, The Trench. James Wan, we got news a while ago that James Wan was going to produce a more horror-themed, flavored spin-off movie from Aquaman based on The Trench. Those aquatic, humanoid, piranha-like, carnivorous creatures underwater that we saw debut for the first time in live action in Aquaman 1, but who are some pretty scary, interesting looking creatures in the comics and whom we're going to see more of in their own movie. Now, James Wan is producing, but he is not, the last I read, directing. They need someone to do it. So maybe Scott Derrickson, because he has a horror background, it could work. And DC has had a lot of success, taking horror directors and letting them do superhero movies. James Wan started in horror himself, as did David F. Sandberg, who did Shazam. So it could be a great fit for Scott Derrickson. Number 2, Justice League Dark. We've been hearing reports that had been in development for a while, but nothing had come to fruition. I think Guillermo del Toro was supposed to do it, and then Doug Liman was supposed to do it. And because, Justice League Dark involves a lot of DC magic users, and if you've read a lot of the magic comics, the mystical DC comics, they do tend to go to some pretty dark places. So that could fit someone with Scott Derrickson's, history and aesthetic. A darker, kind of Justice League Dark movie, more scarier at points. I don't know if I would make that a flat-out horror movie, but you could make it a lot more harsh and maybe brutal, I guess, or atmospherically horror-like than you could with whatever they intend to do with Doctor Strange 2. Because, Marvel has that formula, and it's very successful for them, but they can never really cross the line too much because they want to make sure that they're staying family-friendly. But with Justice League Dark, they don't have to. Number 3, Hellblazer, or, Constantine. Constantine is a very famous magic user. I think DC's most popular magic user. It's either him or Zatanna, but I'm thinking it might be John Constantine. I think he might have eclipsed Zatanna in popularity. So that could be something that Scott Derrickson will do. Our first live-action Hellblazer and a new reinvention of John Constantine. Maybe with Keanu Reeves returning as the character. Keanu Reeves, I think both Marvel and DC have wanted Keanu Reeves for different things. But he hasn't signed on the dotted line for either one yet that we know of. So maybe he'll reprise his role in a Scott Derrickson-directed Hellblazer or John Constantine movie. Now, the Hellblazer comics, those can't really be done or shouldn't be done in Constantine. You could easily do those darker. Like, a lot of people might think it's blasphemy or an abomination to do like Hellblazer and make it safe and family-friendly. So if Scott Derrickson wants to, let his darkness, let his darkness out, Hellblazer or a Constantine movie might be a best outlet for that. Number 4, Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing has had many different versions of his comics, but the most famous and the most successful Swamp Thing runs have been horror and darker, supernatural suspense, thriller. The Swamp Thing TV show or streaming show that was on DC Universe was more like that. And a lot of people would imagine that if and when Swamp Thing comes to DC movies, it should be the same way. Swamp Thing comics can be very hardcore, very graphic, a lot of death, a lot of, gore. If you've read Swamp Thing comics, the older ones, dark places. And, a horror director like Scott Derrickson could be the best person for that. Gothic horror or just, weird kind of horror. Number 5, Animal Man. Animal Man comics have often been a bit more weird and disgusting and gory too at times, and dealt with some pretty hardcore themes. They did back when Grant Morrison wrote them, back in I think that was the early 90s or late 80s. And when they brought the Animal Man comic back in the New 52, they also made that a horror comic. Swamp Thing and Animal Man came back in the New 52, and both those comics, I read both those comics at that time, they were both very, strong, with a strong horror element. And so Animal Man himself as his character could be something that Scott Derrickson could sink his teeth into as well. Number 6, the Doom Patrol. The Doom Patrol are weird and off-kilter and about the more disturbing parts of being a superhero. They deal a lot with mental illness, and you could do Doom Patrol, I think, if you wanted to, very dark or horror-like if you wanted to. They have a show on DC Universe that is very weird and out there, and sometimes it's lighter in tone, but it still covers a lot of that weird, surreal stuff, and I think that you could tell those same kinds of stories would be a lot more dark and disturbing if you wanted to. Or even if you were just going to keep it light, you could go more surreal, more so than I think you can in a Marvel movie, which might in and of itself be something that would make Scott Derrickson happier. More creative freedom. So there we have it, 6 DC movies that Scott Derrickson could flex his creative muscles on. Because with DC, Warner Brothers does often like to take more risks and is open to experimentation and going to darker corners of entertainment than Marvel usually likes to go in. But what do you think? Do you agree that these would be a good fit for him? And if so, are there any more movies or characters, super teams, characters, or villains perhaps, you think would be a good fit for him? Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like it on YouTube and subscribe to the channel because I appreciate your viewership, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.